Joining us now is former Goldman Sachs Asset Management Chair and former UK Treasury Minister Jim O'Neill. Jim, always good to talk to you. How are you feeling about the economic prospects in the U.S. and globally these days?
Not entirely sure. I think things look potentially better, but obviously there's all sorts of banana skins out there still, some of which we know about. But certainly seems to me that leans me a touch towards the more positive side still, that the inflation evidence is improving. I notice past half hour you've had the latest Michigan 5-year inflation expectation survey, Sarah, that I always followed throughout my professional career, and it's down at 2.9, which it was on the previous short-term, last time it was out, which is pretty good news given where it's being edging up, and I think that'll make the Fed feel marginally more gratified about the underlying trend as well. And you see that same sort of thing in many parts of the world.
But the problem is, Jim, the market is already there and anticipating that the Fed goes one more time in May and then pauses and then potentially cuts. Does that align with your view? I mean, Larry Fink was just telling us he doesn't expect inflation to settle down below 4%, and that's going to keep the Fed continuing to raise and remain high.
So that's partly why I sort of dithered a bit when you first asked me that, as you know from when I've been on with you recently, I think it was pretty easy to expect the market to do this. But to sustain this strength or go a lot higher when the market has priced in Fed easing, given what the Fed keeps saying, and we've got the famous month of May just round the corner, and we've had a pretty good year. I'm not sure I'd want to be chasing it too much right now. But that said, I suspect we will creeping higher until the Fed comes and smacks the market down, as it's done occasionally since last fall, might be the most likely path of direction. But I can't see the Fed rushing to ease, because they wouldn't be happy if Larry's right about that on inflation, obviously. And if the economy does rebound more than they're now expecting, it would make them want to stick to at least where we are and open the idea of some modest further tightening. I don't dismiss. And you got the same dilemma over here in Europe, by the way, with the evidence also being pretty similar. So it's delicately balanced, I would say.
Yeah. Jim, as you know, we played a clip from Larry Fink. We spent a lot of time with him a short time ago. He spent a good amount of time talking about China as well, and the decoupling that's going on and the impact that may have, that in his opinion could actually tend towards making inflation harder to eradicate. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on where things stand, U.S., China, Europe, China, and what that decoupling really will mean.
Yeah. So I think what Larry's saying, though, is a kind of almost a pretty typical academic stroke intellectual argument about, if you look at the past 25 years, or at least till a few years ago, the whole integration of China and the interplay with the US was probably part of the disinflationary story globally. So removing that isn't positive. However, as I try to point out to many people, first of all, if you look at the latest Chinese inflation data, of which we had some yesterday, their inflation performance is extremely soft, despite the fact they're having a big cyclical rebound out of COVID. And then something else which I think I saw you guys reporting on, actually, which caught my eye, the whole idea of Apple starting to produce more and more iPhones in India instead of China. And the idea, I've never thought the idea of India being a major replacement for everything China did so cheaply should be taken too far, but there are plenty of places around the world that can try to offer the same kind of production value. So I'm not. Whilst big picture, I get where Larry's saying that, but you know, the dynamics are such that I don't see that, given where we've come from, as being an issue in the near future myself.
Jim, are people talking about Macron's visit as a surprise, or?
Sorry, I meant to. Sorry, I should have touched on that. I think that's a very, very interesting thing, and I think as it relates to Europe, if you look at what Macron had to say, and if you look at some other people, I've just noticed a very interesting speech from a senior European official that was supposed to be in Beijing today, but he has COVID, so his trip got cancelled. There's quite a lot of European policymakers trying to distinguish themselves in terms of nuances about their role with China, which is obviously controversial when seen from a US and a sort of historic ally perspective. But frankly, I think it's the right thing for Europe to try and do. Europe needs to decide on its own appropriate policy with China and not just adopt everything that the US effectively bullies it into doing or wanting, the same way that my own country, the UK, has done too much of, in my view.
Jim, always good to get your thoughts. The brick creator, right? The original bricks. Jim O'Neill, thank you so much.
Stamps on my forehead forever, Sarah.
At least we didn't do the Lord thing this time. Jim, it's always good to see you.